Tighten your lines as we get ready to sail the seven seas on the Political Pirate Podcast. Join Captain Ted Yoho and the salty dog John Martin as they search far and wide for the greatest treasure of all, the truth. From local Florida news to nationwide stories and the globe beyond, we've got it all mapped out. Now here's your hosts, the salty dog John Martin and Captain Ted Yoho.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 3Ps Political Pirate Podcast featuring the old salty dog and the captain of our ship, none other than the great Ted Yoho, coming to you live from down in the Florida Keys. Good morning, Ted. How are you?
Good morning, man. And down in the beautiful Florida Keys, here we are, and it's been great weather.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you've seen it up this way, but today it's supposed to be, the actual temperature is supposed to be 100 degrees with the actual humidity, as they call it, around 112 here in the Gainesville area.
Is that right? My brother says it's been hot up there, yeah.
It's supposed to be pretty warm. Well, we got some huge news coming over the weekend, broke it late yesterday afternoon, and we're going to use a Breitbart template and get right to it here. President Donald Trump announced a sweeping trade agreement with the EU on Sunday. And I don't know if you saw any of the coverage of this, Ted, but it was pretty remarkable. Let me read this little caption here and then we'll get into it. The EU will purchase, among other things, $750 billion in U.S. energy while also investing $600 billion into America on top of existing investments. What are your thoughts on what you heard about that yesterday?
I think it's great. You know, I was reading about that and I listened to his interview and, it's amazing that he's been able to do this. And this is something that, if we go back, John, if you remember when he announced he was going to do this trade tactic of his, how everybody said it's going to ruin the economy. People are going to block U.S. imports and all that. But this has been a very good thing in the fact that it's brought people to the table to reorganize these out-of-balance trade deals that the United States has had with these countries. And you look at the investment coming into America, I got to give him credit on this. This is something he's won really well on, or as he would say, hugely.
Well, I thought what I don't know if they call her the president or whatever, the head of the EU at the moment, what she said during their little press conference is she actually admitted that there was a pretty big trade imbalance between the United States and the EU and that needed to be remedied, which I thought was kind of interesting that she would acknowledge that right off the top.
Well, you know, it really is. And this is something, it doesn't happen overnight or over a 4-year period. But if I remember right, it was $1.3 trillion trade deficits we had with countries around the world. And, you know, that means we're getting a lot of trade, but these countries are benefiting more by us accepting their products and they kind of shun ours. And so this is an adjustment that needed to be made. And with her language agreeing that, yeah, this was a good thing. I think as we move forward, you're going to see other countries get in line and say, you know what, it's time to adjust these things. And I think that's going to wind up here in America, creating more manufacturing jobs here for exports, which is what we really need.
Yeah, and I don't know if it was theater. I'm sure part of it was theatrics, but Donald Trump said before, he had a little mini press conference with her before they went in to negotiate and literally set it up by saying, I'd say it's a 50-50 chance that we can come to a deal. It really depends on whether we're going to be serious or play games, and we should know within the hour. And I'm watching that live and I'm thinking within the hour. Now, of course, they had stuff going on in the background for months. I realize that. But she kind of acknowledged the same thing. And then sure enough, about an hour later, they pop back out and say, well, from 50-50 to the deal is done. To me, the theatrics of it were pretty amazing.
It really is. And you said you didn't know if he was doing this for theatrics. I'm going to say it's Donald Trump. There is going to be theatrics. But, you know, it's a good thing because it's out there. Unlike the Zelensky thing that was the wrong theatrics, this was a positive one. And again, it's going to get other countries' attention to where they say, we need to get on board with this now, because what they're looking for is certainty. They want certainty. And this is a era of certainty, and that saying America's not going to play these games. The important thing, John, is that these policies become, I want to say, solidified in some kind of legislation so that the next administration doesn't come in and say, oh, we'll go back the way we were, because that creates uncertainty again. And of course, it'll favor the other countries. And this really goes back to our founding fathers, like George Washington, open and fair trade with all nations. And then the other part of that was entanglement with none.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that came out in there at the top of this, I mean, all of this stuff is very important, but I want to focus real quickly on the $750 billion in energy that they're going to purchase from us. Most of that probably natural gas, that type of thing.
Sure.
But people are talking about like Russia and Ukraine and all. That is a direct shot at Russia and Vladimir Putin. Because if that's true, that they're going to get $750 billion in energy from us, they're not going to need to get it from Russia, which they have been doing, which has essentially been financing the Ukraine war on the Russian side. So people who want to accuse Donald Trump of being a pocket puppet of Putin, there's another piece for you right there. That $750 billion is huge, to put it mildly.
It really is. And it's, again, this ties into foreign policy, on trade, but also on energy and the ramifications of them, as you just brought up, the $750 billion in energy, if they're getting it from us, how it puts pressure on these other nations, i.e. Putin or Venezuela, which is another authoritarian type of government that has a lot of energy, but it puts pressure on these countries that they need to change their ways. We're not dictating to them. We're just saying we've got a better deal, and that we're forming these stronger alliances with these other countries. And this is an important time for not just America, but for the rest of the world. And the EU understands that. And that's why they're coming to the table. And, you saw what he did with Japan. You're going to have these other countries follow similar suits because they're going to want that same kind of a deal. And I was reading about South Korea saying, we want to make sure we're not left out in these negotiations. So, you got to create activity, and he's done that.
You're talking about 400, when you talk about the EU, you're talking about 450 million people. And what I also found interesting is kind of a sidebar to the story. I read some different things and did a little research on it, that apparently there were leaders of various EU countries led by the new chancellor, I think, in Germany, that were putting pressure on the EU itself to cut a deal with America because they wanted it to happen, which I thought was pretty interesting as well.
No, you're absolutely right. They were putting pressure on that. And again, it goes back to creating certainty. You can't run an economy if you don't know what your future costs are going to be, or what the future agreement's going to be between countries on trade, the tariffs and all that. Once you have that, you can start really investing. And that's where you grow your economy. And I heard some of the pundits, the negative ones, saying, "Oh, it's really going to hurt the EU gross domestic product." But when you look at it, the estimates right now, two things. One is they don't have all the details. The second thing is they're saying it'll be a 0.5% maybe effect to their economy, which is negligible.
Yeah, and then another kind of sidebar story to it, and they mentioned it during the press conference that they had, is that like Cambodia and Thailand have been going at it. It's not getting much news coverage, but they've been basically having little border skirmishes over the last couple of months. And now they're saying they want to be part of a trade deal with us. And Donald Trump basically told them that, we'll talk about that once you stop fighting. And apparently they're prepared today to meet and stop the fighting in there. So Donald Trump is using trade to negotiate peace deals still. And, this could fall in line with going back to that energy issue, with ultimately bringing peace between Ukraine and Russia, because they're becoming more isolated as these other countries have trade deals with us, including certainly the EU.
They really are. And, he's going to come out with a new set of sanctions and a new timeline for Russia and Ukraine to get their act together and stop blowing people up and work at growing their economies and really supporting the people of their country. Excuse me. And with Cambodia and Thailand, Cambodia is a vassal state of China. Hun Sen has been in power for, I think he's the longest serving ruler in the world. I think it's close to 40 years. And they're billionaires that they've kind of funneled money to them and their kids. And Thailand, we've got the longest running diplomatic relationships with Thailand. I think it's 185 years to 190 years now. And they've never been taken over by any other country. And they're a good ally of ours. We do a lot of military games and working back and forth between the two countries. So they're an important ally.
Yeah, well, if you don't want to fight with people that you're making money off of. So if you think about it, probably the surest way to peace is through economic cooperation, because who wants to disrupt the apple cart, so to speak, if you're making a profit on it? So I think Donald Trump is on to something when it comes to peace through trade. And I know you talked quite a bit about that when you were in Congress about trade. And what was that saying you had, Ted, about trading? It's always been interesting.
We want to move from aid to trade.
Absolutely.
We were giving out perpetual aid to these countries that were voting against us in the UN. They were dependent on us. They weren't focused on their own economy because they had us as a sugar daddy. And I'm like, this has got to end. And so we wanted to move a vehicle that would help countries move from aid to trade. And we did that with the DFC, the Development Finance Corporation.
Well, back to this article again. If you're just tuning in, what we're talking about is apparently the United States and the EU, the European Union, have agreed to terms on a deal with tariffs and everything else. But according to this article, additional EU countries will be setting tariffs on U.S. goods at 0%. And Europe agreed to purchase a vast amount of military equipment from us as well. Now, this is in addition to what NATO has agreed to. Now, NATO and the EU aren't 100% the same, but there's a huge overlap there. So when you combine what happened with NATO recently, talking about upping it up to 5% of their GDP, and then what the EU has now agreed to, that is a tremendous economic benefit to the United States.
It really is. And, you said something that I had not heard before: peace through trade. There's peace through strength. But I think this is just as important, peace through trade. That's why I always advocated for the Foreign Affairs Committee as the most important committee on the Hill, because if you have good foreign policy, or if you have good trade policies, you have good domestic policies, because you've got manufacturing that are selling products in the trade industry. And if you have good domestic policies and good trade policies, you have a better chance at having strong national security.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about this over the weekend, Ted. It's kind of a sidebar again to this, but you mentioned China, and we talked a little bit about Russia earlier. That, and this is just something I came up with. Communist countries actually need conflict to stay in power, because if they can't exist without some kind of boogeyman, some kind of enemy, because people, they'll get tired of all that. It's one thing, like in Russia, for instance, or China, it's one thing to stand in food lines and those types of things if you're doing it for sacrifice for the betterment of the country, because, the bad old USA might be coming in or something like that. But when you don't have an enemy, you kind of look around and go, well, what is the point of all of this? So right. I think Trump realizes that as well. And that gets back to the trade with peace and everything else that I was thinking about.
Well, what you brought up,
economy can bring peace. It really can.
Well, it really can. And, if you're trading with people, you don't want to go to war with them in general. But what you just brought up was the communists have to have a suppression. They cannot have any entity higher than the Communist Party. That's why they're so against religions and deities and, the Falun Gong sect that's over there. And if you can't suppress the people and control them, they're out of business. And John, that's a similarity between the Democrat Socialist Marxist Party that we have trying to get power here in America. They want to make people feel like they're dependent on that party for their livelihood. Whereas, the free-thinking people that believe in liberty and freedom and the constitutional republic, they know that our lives are in our hands, and we're blessed to have a system that gives us opportunity in this country. And that's what those people in those other countries don't have, is opportunity.
Absolutely. Well, I want to play a video here in just a moment. That is, I think you say her name is von der Leyen. I hope that's her name. It's hard for me to pronounce. Von der Leyen.
Yeah.
But she's gonna. This is a snippet from the press conference for her. And I want you to hear the language that she uses in describing this, and I'll come back and make a point in a minute, but it's fascinating to me and comical to a certain extent. I chuckle about it, and I'll explain in a minute why she uses this language. It's really interesting. Have we got that one teed up? All right, let's play it. We'll come back and talk about it.
Big deal between the two largest economies in the world. And it's a big deal. It's a huge deal. It will bring stability. It will bring predictability. That's very important for our businesses on both sides of the Atlantic. It's 15% tariffs across the board, all inclusive. It's a huge deal. Yeah. It was tough negotiations. I knew it at the beginning, and it was indeed very tough, but we came to good conclusions for both sides. So again, congratulations and many thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, Ted, this lady here, and I'm not putting her down in any way, but she comes probably from an aristocratic kind of background in Europe. You don't rise to that level without that. And here she is saying that this is a huge deal. I'm surprised she didn't use the word bigly or whatever. She's literally using Donald Trump's lingo to describe this deal. To me, that is just amazing.
It's funny that you brought that up, because when I heard that, I was thinking the same thing. That's the influence he has done on the world stage. When people start mimicking you, that is one of the hallmarks of success, because they're flattering you because they want to be more like you. And, like him or love him or whatnot, you can't deny the results he's getting.
No doubt. And she uses some great terms too. She talks about this bringing stability and predictability, which is something you kind of mentioned before, that if somebody comes in after Trump and tries to change all this, they're just going to disrupt everything, because economies like to know stability and predictability. That's what they want to see. And you can see already, and I've obviously seen it since we started the show, but I was looking at the Dow futures and whatnot this morning, and they're predicting quite a sharp rise in the stock market today. And I'm sure it's based on this.
Oh, I'm sure it is, because anytime you can create that kind of certainty, John, you stabilize the markets. And the one thing markets don't like is that unpredictability, uncertainty, as you said. Go back to when Trump announced the tariffs, how the stock market dropped, and it was all the doomsdayers out there, he's ruined the economy. But all that stuff is so fluid and short-lived. Once you get into the details and you start laying out and getting these agreements, that creates that certainty and stability, and people are going to invest. Without that, they won't invest. I learned that when I went to Congress. There's a section of the tax code called the 179, and that's where you can write off expenses right now. And so Congress would not announce that until the very end of the year, like the last week of December. And then what would happen is I was getting calls from farmers and all these people like, hey, are they going to extend the 179? I says, why? Well, I got some tractor and equipment, a couple $100,000 I want to buy, and I'm not going to do it if they don't extend that. Well, they extend it every year, but it's not announced, so it's uncertainty. And I said, we just need to make that permanent, because I want people buying products all year long, not waiting to the very end of the year. And that's what he's done with this trade deal. He's creating that certainty, and she appreciated how hugely it is.
Well, she mentioned in her comments there that it's tough negotiations and kind of giving credit to the president. But people need to understand what Donald Trump is doing, love him, hate him, whatever. What he is accomplishing economically is making sure that the United States is still the economic center of the universe, so to speak, of the world. And that is not only great for America, obviously, but I would make a strong case it's better for the world to have us be that beacon of freedom, that shining light on the hill. We still need to be that. It's better for us and it's better for the world.
It really is. And, he is showing people that America is back and we are leading. And, we didn't, not necessarily we want to be the leader, but we don't want to be the dog in the rear either. It's better to be out front leading than following. And he is bringing the status of America back, especially after the disastrous years of Biden and Harris and the 8 years of Obama with his wokeism and his fundamentally transforming America, convincing people that America wasn't a great nation or wasn't any greater than any other nation. And, we're paying the price for that now, and Trump's fixing that.
Well, going back to what she said, and you mentioned it in your comments about her, flattery, mimicry is the best form of flattery. But remember, Hillary talked about the reset button with Russia and all that kind of stuff. Donald Trump has literally reset the world right now. Now, what will ultimately come out of it, I don't know, but he has absolutely reset everything in the world at this moment.
He has, and it was time for a reset. And I just hope this investigation that Tulsi Gabbard has started leads to stuff John Ratcliffe, the director of, DSI, Director of Intelligence, how he said that he feels the statute of limitations does not apply to the Obama, Brenner, Clapper, the deep state that went after Trump. And I hope they nail those people. And, this is a good thing.
Yeah, I think he's actually CIA chief now, right? He was the DNA in the last term of Tulsi, is it now? I'm pretty sure he knows all the secrets, right? But the coverage of this story, Donald Trump, is what just happened. You might end up on a list somewhere, man. I don't know him. I never heard of him. The coverage of this story will be interesting because I watched, as I do, Ted, all the time, a public service, so you don't have to. I watched some MSNBC this morning to see how and you know what they were talking about this morning? After all this huge trade deal, one of the biggest accomplishments of the Trump administration so far, they were talking about Epstein. That's all they were talking about was Epstein. And they didn't even mention this story. It's just unbelievable.
It is. And you know what they're going to find in Epstein more than Donald Trump is Bill and Hillary Clinton and maybe even Obama. So, let's keep talking about the Epstein files because I want to bring those dirtbags out.
Yeah, I hear you. All right. Well, we're going to take a quick commercial break and then we're going to update you, sadly so, on a story that we talked about Friday. But it is, all politics is local, as Tip O'Neill used to say. And this one here breaks my heart to bring it to you, but we're going to bring it to you nonetheless. Let's take a quick commercial break, Ted. We'll be right back. Go ahead.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
This is Ward Scott, and I want to thank all our sponsors who keep the show going and pay the bills. The Ward Scott Files premium sponsors are Crime Prevention Security Systems, large enough to serve you, small enough to care.
Meldon Law, the only official injury partner of the Florida Gators.
The Ward Scott Files Gold sponsors are Lewis Oil Company,
Shoot GTR,
On the Spot Dry Cleaners, R&R Construction, and Style Cuts. If you are interested in promoting your business on the show, you can visit our website, www.wardscottfiles.com, and click on the Advertise Here banner on the right side of the page or call my friend Freddie at 352-284-3733. Again, thank you to all the great businesses that support the Ward Scott Files. And remember, if you like the show, thank our sponsors and support the businesses that support us.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. May God have mercy on your soul.
Ward, that very much surprises me that you've never been tased.
You can't handle the truth.
All bees poop.
A warthog. He's going to come up the steps. Here he comes. Oh my goodness, and he's huge. Hello, boy. Wonder if we can pet him. Hi, boy.
Can we touch him? No, don't.
Help me! Help! Help!
And we're back to the Political Pirate Podcast with yours truly, the old salty dog, John Martin, and the captain of our ship, Mr. Ted Yoho. Good morning again, Ted. Glad to have you, my
Great
friend.
To be back.
Well,
Appreciate
I want
our listeners and sponsors.
Absolutely. If you'd like to be a sponsor of our show, just look at the tagline you'll see periodically up there. Contact Freddie. We'd love to have you like what we're doing, share what we're doing, and support our sponsors. We greatly
And our goal is
appreciate
to educate, motivate, and activate people. And we're planning on going nationwide. So get in now while you can.
Absolutely. Well, talking about something that we talked about on Friday that had national implications, but this is local. And this is where Alachua County School Board Chair, when she was informed that Hulk Hogan died. Now, why she felt compelled to say this, she literally, now this is the chair of the local school board. She said, and I quote here, good, one last MAGA. That's what she said about Trump. One last MAGA, talking about the Hulkster. Wow. It's just unbelievable. What are your thoughts on that, Ted? Now, this is the chair of the school board supposedly educating our kids, but on the break, you talked about how this is happening all over the country. Elaborate on that for us.
Well, you ask, how can somebody do this? It's anger. They're angry. And if you look at what the Democrats are doing, they're all saying the same thing. You look at that doctor in Texas when the floods happened out there, how she says, oh, those are all Trump supporters. They deserve to die. Then there was that young lady, the African-American lady that just went on. This is a white Christian camp. There were no black people, no people of color. They got what they deserved. It just shows their level of hatred and anger. And they're not looking to a better America. They're not looking to unite in America. They're looking to keep the division because they don't like so many things about what our country stands for, instead of embracing the good qualities of this nation and working to make it better. John, you and I, it's like when you go fishing, you don't go out there to go fishing just to, tear up your equipment. Every time you go out, you want to learn better spots, learn better techniques. You don't want to learn worse techniques, but the Democrats are tearing things apart. The Republican side, especially with Trump, they're building for a better future in America. This lady, Sarah Rockwell from Alachua County, does not deserve to be on the Board of Education. As you brought up, she's an educator. My God, this woman's got a bachelor's, a master's, and a PhD. And she's there teaching our children with this kind of attitude. Get her out of there, Alachua County. Be honest with you, I haven't shared this on the air before, but one of the main reasons I left Alachua County and moved to Putnam County was their liberal policies. It was just crazy. During COVID, they had all that social distancing. You had to go down Publix in one aisle and back in another. In Willaca, there were no masks. You were an adult. You took care of yourself.
Yeah, well, people are always asking, like, well, what can I do and that type of thing. And, they tend to want to focus, like you said, everybody you talk to wants to run for Congress and they don't know why. I tell people what you need to be is more involved at the very local level, whether it's on your, whatever the next level is, whether it's your city commission, the school board, either run for it or support other people, because this is where it really starts. We're not really, think about this, Ted, and you may disagree with me, but how we really fundamentally get America back on track is not necessarily at the congressional level. It's starting at the school board. It's starting at the local city commission. It's even starting at your homeowners association or something. Get involved. Be that type of person that you want to see elected to government. Support those kind of people, because I would maintain that if we have better school boards, if we have better city commissions, if we have better county commissions, we're going to have better congressmen and congresswomen.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and it goes a step below that too, John. Teaching your children. Teach your children the way to go. It's biblical. It's Christian values. Teach them right from wrong, good from evil. And, those are the very basics, and you build from that. You brought up on a local level. I live in the town of Willaca. They elected a mayor. After about 3 weeks, less than 2 months or 3 months, she quit, left the city high and dry. And now the acting interim mayor, they're going through everything and say, oh, there's a revenue shortfall because it's been mismanaged, and they want to raise taxes on us. And I'm thinking, wait a minute here. I'm going to get involved on a local level because you're raising my taxes because you mismanaged. How about we take away from you because you don't know what you're doing? And so I think we're going to get more involved in that. But that goes up the line, too, from, like you said, local to national, or local, state, and then nationally. And you said this before, you don't get the government you want, you get the one you deserve. Well, we're taking America back by educating people and letting them know what's going on. And I hope that anybody in Alachua County that's listening to this will ask for Sarah Rockwell to be removed from the public or the Alachua County School Board. She has no business being there.
Well, I'm going to play a video here in a minute, but in case you're just tuning in, we're talking about the local chair, the chair of the local Alachua County School Board. When informed that Hulk Hogan had died, she literally said, "Good, one last MAGA." So she was glad the man died. I can't think about that on any level of wishing even, maybe a dictator or something, but I don't, I've political, I don't know if you call it enemies, people I adamantly disagree with, but I don't wish them ill health. But I want to play this video, Ted, because, not too long ago, you had a very prominent Democrat that accused the Republicans of always going low. Let's listen to her in her own words, and we'll come back and talk about it. Let's have a picture for that. You don't have... Just a picture. Can you put it up there? Yeah, okay. I'm sorry about that. But there's Michelle Obama. You remember when she was at the convention talking about, she said, when Republicans go low, we go high. I don't see how that plays into what I'm hearing from the Democrats now, because it sounds like when they go low, their only solution is to go even lower. They are mud raking, cursing. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Well, it is. And then you played those several sound bites of the cursing from the Democrat Party. Don Norcross, I told you, from Jersey, saying the F-bomb, F Trump, and all of them standing in line like little kids having a challenge. Who can say the dirty word? And I'm just as good as you. I'm mean. I can say a dirty word just like you. And so Michelle Obama, I remember that speech very well. We're better than that. When they go low, we go high. Look at the Obama administration. You can't get any lower than that. To run a treasonous act against the United States of America, to get Donald Trump unelected or prevent him from being elected, and then stifling his first term, that is pretty low. You can't get any lower than that. And so, Michelle Obama, you need to keep your words to yourself or make amends to those, along with Barry.
Well, you know, you always spark a memory and stuff or a thought on me, Ted, and
That's why I'm here, John.
the reason why I'm grinning, and you'll understand in a second, is because you talked about them doing that F-bomb thing, you know, and like little children. It reminded me, I had twin nephews of mine, and I want to say they were just barely like maybe middle school or no, but younger than that, I guess. And I guess they'd had some level of sex education at school that day. And I picked them up from it. And they started saying the words penis and vagina. And I'd like, what? They just wanted to get a reaction. They knew that if they said those words that they'd get a reaction out of adults. And that's all they were doing for about 3 or 4 days. They would run around going, penis, vagina, just to get a reaction. That's kind of what the Democrats are doing. Because you can see it in their faces. You know what I mean? They're like giddy that, I don't know if I should say this, F you. It's just crazy. It's childish.
You know, that's funny. You reminded me here at our house in the Keys, we had a little 15-foot whaler, and we had the walkie-talkies that had about 1.5 mile range, and the kids would go out right around the corner. There would be 4 or 5 kids in there with life jackets, and we would let them go. They're just at where we could see the boat, and they would go to this little place. They called it Mud Island. It wasn't an island. It was just the bank. And they said, we would call it Cuss Island. I said, you went down. Of course, the kids are in the 30s now, so they'd fess up. And I said, well, Cuss Island, I never knew that. What would you say? Oh, we'd say things like, oop. and, you know, I think my daughter said the S word, S-H-I-T, and she was embarrassed telling me as an adult, but they'd go down there. And just like you said, let's say a dirty word, wordy dirt.
But isn't that what the Democrats are doing now? It's like
that's what it seems like.
It's really childish. It is.
Exactly.
But back to this story a little bit. This Rockwell, the lady that said that good one last MAGA about Hulk Hogan, she has come back now and took the Facebook post down. But this is what she said, released a statement. She said in her comment stating she made a cruel and flippant comment, no joke. And this is what she said, Ted, I never will wish harm on anyone regardless of whether we share political views. And to use a dirty word, I got to call cow patty on this one. It is total.
You're right. And if you believe that about what she said, stand on your head.
Yeah. Wow. But yeah, she said, I never meant to hurt anyone. Right. Okay. But all right, we're going to move on now. This comes to you from the Daily Signal, and it's a story that you brought to my attention, Ted, and I appreciate it. But Anna Presley, who is a congresswoman, I believe, from Massachusetts, right, proposes codifying DEI in the federal government. In other words, the Trump administration is trying to do away with DEI, but she is wanting to codify diversity and inclusion into federal government, which would be like on steroids. I'm trying to think of the word for it anyway.
No, it really would. It would codify that into law for here on out. It would be one of the standards that America would have to, do all the time. And you look at that picture, that is an angry person. And again, it's anger. You ask, why do the Democrats do this? It's anger. They are angry because of their policies America doesn't buy, and they want to project it to the Republican Party. It's not the Republican Party, lady. It is your policies that the American people in mass have rejected. Get over it, smarten up, and change your policies. And to codify the DEI and wokeism, the rest of the world's gotten away from that. If you go back to Jamie Dimon, he came out with Klaus Schwab and said, it was Klaus Schwab was famous for saying by 2030, you'll own nothing and be happy. And they're pushing the DEI and the wokeism and the one world government. Jamie Dimon says, these corporations, I'm giving you a warning, you'll either go woke or you'll go broke. Now, that was back a year and a half ago. Now he's on the opposite side. He's a businessman. He wants the money. So now he's going and saying, oh, we're getting away from that DEI and wokeism. That was all wrong. And a lot of the boards of these companies are getting away from that. Your Targets, I think Ford said that we're ending all DEI. All your major corporations are ending it because it's social engineering. And it's kind of like Jesse Jackson did with the Budweiser companies, or P. Diddy was trying to do. If you don't sell, P. Diddy went to that vodka company, and if you don't let me have a distributorship, I'm going to sue you for $100 million over racism. And Jesse Jackson did the same thing with with a beer distributorship. And people are tired of that, John. And I think hearing from our listeners, they agree with that. They don't want this kind of policies running America or anything.
Well, you talk about people are tired of it. Well, even from what I'm seeing in polling and talking to the man on the street, so to speak, a lot of black people are getting tired of some of this language as well. Because like the Urban League's president, Mark Morrell, said at this Anna Presley's unveiling of this Equity in Government Act. Listen to what he said. He said, the Trump administration's policies have brought us to the point where we could return to America of segregated bathrooms. I mean, my God, man, segregated bathrooms. Does anyone really believe that? Seriously believe that we are returning to segregated bathrooms, for God's sake?
And again, it's projecting hatred and spewing that kind of nonsense out there, and that we're not protecting marginalized communities. Give me a break. Again, we have gone. You and I grew up through the civil rights movement. And it was ugly. And I remember the colored drinking fountains and colored entrance and all that. And that was wrong. We had the civil rights movement, or the riots. We went through that. The Civil Rights Act came out. We have become a better country because of that. And for these people saying that this is going to bring us back, the only people that are bringing us back to that are them, the Democratic, Socialist, Marxist, Communist Party.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, she said, Ms. Presley's at her press conference, she said, according to the Massachusetts Democrats website, the bill would codify into law Joe Biden's executive orders, as they list them here, that promoted diversity, equity, inclusion policies throughout government. These are the very policies that brought you, and I think we got a picture of these two dudes, I guess, but one of them's a woman in a dress and the other one's a woman that steals dresses. I wonder if they steal them for each other, but it's just unbelievable, man.
I just can't believe that's the best face of America that Biden, because he's run by Obama.
You kind of just mentioned it, Ted, but I want to read this quick comment that she also, Presley said, you're afraid to stand again to protect marginalized communities who are under assault of Donald Trump and his Republican co-conspirators. Protect marginalized communities. I guess she's talking about black communities predominantly, maybe LGBT, but they're everywhere.
Anything that's not white male is what they mean.
But this is the thing, Ted, I want to ask you this question. So, marginalized community, if you say a group of people are incapable, for instance, of getting an ID, I've never met a black person that has told me that they can't get an ID. They have to get an ID for everything, just like anybody. So you're telling me that black communities, because of their skin tone, can't get IDs. To me, that is marginalizing the community, in my opinion. That I heard a guy on Facebook the other day, a black man at one of these Turning Point USA rallies. He literally said that the Democrat solution is to have, put you at the head of the line to go to school, like at UF or some university that you may not be qualified for, instead of actually fixing the school that you came from that would make you qualified to be in a school. They want to fix the symptom, but not the problem. To me, that's marginalizing a community. That's just my opinion.
Well, and again, their resounding message is where you're at is not your fault because the system is working against you. Eric Holder was this way. Barack Obama was this way. Al Gore was this way. We've got two Americas, the wealthy elites and the poor marginalized people. I remember there's an organization in Alachua County, the 4 A's, Alachua, African American Association. And as a candidate, I was able to show up. I got invited to speak at that. Or you didn't get invited. If you didn't show up, you wouldn't get their support, which I never got their support. But I remember very succinctly, very clearly, this lady asked me, I want to know what you're doing for the Black youth on the east side of town. I said, ma'am, at my position, I can't see color. I can't afford to see color. I see people. And if there are people that are in need of help, I'm here to help them. You know, because you can't really look at, well, that's a Black person, I'm not going to help them, or that's an Asian American, I'm not going to help them. I see people, and I hope the rest of the politicians look at this. But what I see through people like Ione Presley is I see hatred, I see anger. And the other thing, John, is they're saying that these marginalized communities need help because the people are too stupid to help themselves, is a message I get. And I would be highly offended if I was one of those marginalized communities that she's talking about, and her saying that, and it's like you said, and you brought up before, when Obama was talking down to the Black males for not voting for Harris, you know, because she's a woman, and he was chastising them. They're like, who are you to talk to me? And I hope the people that she's saying are marginalized communities say, get out of here. You know, she can go stand with Al Sharpton and stir up that stink pot.
Well, clearly when she said Republican co-conspirators, clearly, Ted, she's talking about you, sir. And probably me too. Republican co-conspirators. Wow. I just want America first. I want everybody. I want to rise all the boats up when the incoming tide. But clearly, Ted, the Democrats are running short on ideas. Listen to this. According to CNN, another one I watch or read so you don't have to, Democrats are increasingly posting, check this out, Ted, weightlifting content in hopes of reaching male voters in the so-called manosphere Trump mastered during his campaign. This is from CNN. So you got candidates, including female candidates, who are showing themselves lifting weights, and they're in it for the fight. I guess that's better than the little dances they were doing, but it's unreal.
I'm just laughing because I was thinking of those dances, how they were doing that. And then they get moved up and they were saying all the dirty words together. And then they were saying, like, Stephen Colbert, F Trump, and Adam Schiff. And it's comical to watch them trying to connect to the American people. And if you remember, John, probably a month, 6 weeks ago, they were having that retreat in that real exclusive resort in California to have consultants come out, teach the Democrats how to speak to men voters. And this must have been a result of that, you know, lift weights and look tough, you know, we're manly.
Like that video of Adam Schiff, you mentioned Colbert when he was on his show last week, where he literally, like my little nephews were doing, he literally looked around and went, piss off, piss off. It's just, they're just running out of ideas. But in one video, this Texas Senate candidate, Colin Allred, stands in his home gym after a workout and still in sweat, criticizes President Donald Trump. But in another, and people need to look at this lady who was, she's an Army veteran, so I give her credit for that. But her name is Kate Connolly, and she's running against Mike Lawyer, a Republican out of New York. But she's in there working out with weights, trying to show that somehow she's more fit than he is. Is this what the American voter is looking for, Ted, that they want to see? Because they keep saying the Democrats need to fight. What are they fighting?
They're fighting a losing battle, but they don't realize that, so I want to keep giving them fuel for that. They're angry, and you know, I had a thought, but I lost it.
Well, I'm going to go ahead.
Go ahead. My thought will come back.
I want to play a video of one of your former colleagues because, you know, I guess the lifting weights and the F-bomb and all that, maybe it's better than this. This is Jerry Nadler. This is classic, man. You talk about a poop joke. This is a poop joke. Check out, if we got it ready, check out Jerry Nadler and look at the expression on his face and on Nancy Pelosi. It's unbelievable. Check it out.
Introducing the Protecting Our Democracy Act so that we may restore these and other checks and balances that are so fundamental to our democracy.
As I bring on Congresswoman Maloney, I want to join the distinguished chairman in acknowledging legislation of other members of Congress that are contained in the chairman's legislation that they are putting forth, and chairwoman's. And I also want to acknowledge Maxine Waters is doing some very important work on this subject, not part of this package, but part of preserving our democracy. With that, I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished chairwoman of the Government Reform and Oversight Committee.
So I guess the lifting of weights and everything, Pelosi's like, put the mask on, man. But you were about to tell a story, Ted. Go ahead. You have your own Jerry Nadler story. Go ahead, sir.
Well, I was sitting in the speaker's lobby, reading the newspaper, waiting for votes, and he was sitting there. And I never had a conversation with him, so I tried to strike up a little bit. And he didn't engage, and he belches just, and then he does one of those wafts, right in front of me. And I'm like, man, that's a class act.
Welcome to Congress, Mr. Yoho.
Yeah, really.
But
I guess he said what he thought of me.
I guess when you look at him in that video, they definitely need a change of some type for sure. But speaking of change, one more quick update before we end the show. We talked about Colbert and the firing and all that, but Jay Leno came out and did a pretty in-depth interview, but I want to play a brief snippet because they had a big protest supposedly over the weekend for the firing of Colbert, and a dozen people showed up. So it's obviously a big issue. But Jay Leno, I think, said it better than and more qualified than anybody to speak on this. Let's check this out, and we'll come back and talk about it real quick.
Show for the 22 years, and that your jokes were roughly equally balanced between going after Republicans and taking aim at Democrats.
Well, that's
Did you have a strategy, or was that?
Well, it's funny to me when I got hate letters from you and your Republican friends. Well, Miss Lyon, I hope you and your Democratic buddies are happy over the same joke. And I go, well, that's good. So that's how you get a whole audience. Now you have to be content with half the audience because you have to give your opinion.
How did we get to this place? Or do you have advice for comedians today to sort of bring it back to something?
Rodney Dangerfield and I were friends. I knew Rodney 40 years. I have no idea if he was Democrat or Republican. We never discussed. We just discussed jokes. And to me, I like to think that people come to a comedy show to kind of get away from the things, the pressures of life, wherever it might be. And I love political humor, don't get me wrong, but it's just what happens was people wind up cozying too much to one side or the other.
Comedy can be used to unite or divide people. Do you have any advice on how we can use it for common ground?
This is a great uniter. Funny is funny. People either, it's funny when someone who's not, when you make fun of their side and they laugh at it, I just find getting out, I don't think anybody wants to hear a lecture. To me, it's just, when I was with Rodney, it was always the economy.
Ted, I don't know if they'll listen to it, but Jay Leno pretty much sums up what the problem with comedy in general, late night TV, when he literally says nobody wants to hear a lecture. I mean, I don't think you could say it any better than what he just said.
No, you can. And he brought up several other things. And you and I grew up in that era of the Don Rickles and Rodney Dangerfield and Buddy Hackett's and all those classic comedians that were equal opportunity offenders. And they did it in a fun way. They would offend this group and offend this group, but it was crossing the aisle. And if you're going to poke fun at a Democrat politician, poke one at a Republican and the process in general. But they don't do that now. It's become editorialized. And you think of Colbert, we talked last Monday, I think it was, when it was found out he had a staff of 200 people. 200 people, and the best they can come up with content is the garbage he was spewing. Give me a break. I mean, he deserves to be off the air, and it's nobody's fault other than the writers and him personally and the stations that allowed that garbage to go on. You know, the American people, again, you would think these corporations would say, Trump won resoundingly. The American people won resoundingly. But let's cater to the part that lost and just really dig in. That's a winning proposition, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donald Trump wants to give you change you can spend, not just change for change's sake. But I hope you enjoyed the show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please like what we're doing, share what we're doing, become a sponsor of the show, support those that sponsor us, and we greatly appreciate our audience. And Ted, I'll give you the last word, sir.
Well, I just, again, appreciate that airtime, and I look forward to our questions that are coming in and responding to those, and get people engaged. Please share this show far and wide. Consider being a sponsor. We'd love to have you on a sponsor, on a coffee cup, and to help us get this message out, because this message, and this is something I was very passionate about. I wanted to educate people. I want to get them involved. I don't want to talk about the garbage that a lot of these programs talk about. I want to talk about the problem and the solution, and then how do we become activated in that? I think, John, you're doing a great job, and it's an honor to be on the show with you.
Absolutely. What he said. Peace out, everybody.
Everybody take care. We'll give you a fishing report.